What if I told you that right now, sitting in your backyard, you are burning wood the wrong way? Not a little wrong. Completely, entirely, embarrassingly wrong. And the proof is sitting in a wooden box in an Amish family's attic in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, written in Old German handwriting dated 1742. A fire method so effective that one single load of wood burns for 10 full hours. No one watching it. No electricity, no gadgets. Just heat, deep and steady, rolling out of the ground like a furnace while you sleep. I'm going to show you exactly how it works before this video ends. But first, stay with me for the next 60 seconds, because what I am about to tell you will change the way you look at fire forever. Most people watching this right now have built hundreds of fires in their lifetime. Backyard fire pits, camping trips, bonfire nights with friends. You stacked the wood, you lit the bottom, you watched it roar up into the sky, and you called it a good fire. But here is the truth. Nobody in the camping industry ever wanted you to know. That tall, roaring picture postcard blaze you were so proud of was not a good fire. It was an expensive mistake. Every single flame leaping above your woodpile was heat leaving your body and disappearing into the cold night sky where it does you absolutely zero good. You were not heating yourself, you were heating the atmosphere. And while you were doing that, wood stove companies, propane fire table manufacturers, and lighter fluid brands were counting their profits. If this is your first time on this channel, hit that subscribe button right now and tap the bell. Because Hidden Life Hacks is where we dig up the knowledge that got buried so someone else could keep selling you the broken version. Subscribe now. You are going to want every single video that comes after this one. Now let me tell you what I saw on a cold October evening outside Millersburg, Ohio, because it completely destroyed everything I thought I knew. I pulled up to a farm with an armload of split oak the way I always brought wood to a fire. A man named Daniel looked at my pile, smiled quietly, and told me I would not need most of it. I laughed. He did not. 20 minutes later, 3 small pieces of wood were producing more heat than my entire armload would have generated in a regular pit. I stood there in that Ohio barnyard with my hands out over a hole in the ground, feeling warmth that I had never felt from any above-ground fire I had ever built in my life. I drove home that night, and I sat in my driveway for a long time just thinking, because Daniel had not used any special wood. He had not used any tools I did not own. He had used a method written down before the United States of America even existed. Here is what he did. And pay close attention because this part is the engine of everything. He dug a hole, not a fire pit, a hole, about 12 inches across at the top, 15 inches deep, with the walls tapering slightly inward toward the bottom like a narrow funnel. Then about 10 inches away from that main hole on the side facing into the wind, he dug a second smaller hole, about 6 inches wide, 10 inches deep. Then he connected the 2 holes at the bottom with a tunnel just wide enough to pass your forearm through. That tunnel is the heart of the entire system. When cold air hits that smaller side hole, it does not just drift in gently. It gets pulled down, races through the tunnel, and slams directly into the base of the fire from underneath. It is a bellows that never stops pumping and never needs batteries. The fire is feeding on pure oxygen, delivered exactly where combustion needs it most. At the base, not the top. No fan, no electricity, just physics, working the way it has always worked for people who understood it. And because the fire is below the surface of the ground, the soil itself becomes part of the heating system. The walls of the pit absorb heat during the burn. They glow with stored warmth for hours after the flame is gone. I measured it myself the morning after with a cheap infrared thermometer from a hardware store. The soil around the pit was still reading over 190 degrees Fahrenheit, 8 hours after the last visible flame had died. My old above-ground fire pit at home after the same overnight burn was stone cold before sunrise and already wet with morning dew. That is not a small difference. That is the entire difference. This method has a name in the modern outdoor world. It is called the Dakota fire hole. But the Amish have been running their own refined version of it on farms across Pennsylvania and Ohio since the early 1800s. They brought the core principle over from Germany, from a household manual written in 1742 that describes sinking a fire below ground level for efficiency in cold weather. They refined it over generations. They added the side draft tunnel. They discovered that clay-heavy soil in eastern Pennsylvania and central Ohio holds heat far longer than sandy ground because the clay walls act like a ceramic radiator, storing warmth and releasing it slowly for hours after the fire ends. None of this made it into American camping books. The men writing those books in the 1800s were copying European aristocratic fireplace designs. They were not walking into Amish barnyards and asking the farmers how they stayed warm during a January butchering day when the fire had to last from sunrise to sundown without anyone stopping their work to tend it. That knowledge stayed inside the plain communities, passed from grandfather to grandson in quiet conversations that never made it into any published guide. I only learned it because Daniel's father, a man in his 80s at the time, watched me struggling with a wet fire one afternoon, and finally said with that calm Amish patience that I was working too hard for too little heat. He picked up the shovel. I watched. And 20 minutes later, we had a fire that lasted until the next morning. Now here is how you build it in your own yard this weekend. You need a shovel, a patch of bare dirt at least 4 feet away from any structure, in about 45 minutes. Find a flat spot. If your yard is all grass, lift a small square of sod and set it aside. You can put it back afterward, and nobody will know anything was ever there. Dig your main hole 12 inches across at the top, 15 inches deep. Taper the walls slightly inward toward the bottom. That taper concentrates heat upward toward your hands and face, instead of letting it spread sideways and get lost into the surrounding soil. Now dig your second hole about 10 inches away from the edge of the main pit on the side that faces into your prevailing wind. Make it 6 inches wide and 10 inches deep. Connect the 2 holes at the bottom with your tunnel. Go wide enough to fit your forearm. Do not rush the tunnel. It is the part that makes everything else work. Line the bottom of your main pit with 3 or 4 flat stones, river stones, field stones, old broken brick. The Amish in Holmes County use pieces of salvaged chimney brick, and it works beautifully. Avoid limestone and anything porous because certain stones can crack or even explode when they get hot enough. Now for the wood. And this is where almost every camping guide gets it completely backwards. Do not fill the pit with your best heavy hardwood from top to bottom. The Amish layer their wood with intention. Dense hardwood like oak goes at the bottom of the pit where the draft tunnel feeds oxygen. That heavy wood forms a long burning coal bed that will glow red for hours. On top of that, you place lighter, faster catching hardwood like ash, beech, or dried applewood. That top layer catches quickly, generates the heat needed to kick the system into a stable convection cycle, and then as it burns down, it ignites the dense oak below it. Here is the other part most people get wrong. Light it from the top, not the bottom. Top-down ignition. When you light from the top, the fire burns slowly downward through the woodpile. Hot coals fall onto the heated stones below. The draft tunnel feeds oxygen exactly where it is needed. The wood lasts nearly twice as long as a bottom-lit fire because it is being consumed in a controlled descent instead of all at once in a single explosive rush. Within about 15 minutes of lighting, your flame will be short, blue at the base, almost completely silent, and putting out tremendous heat. There is almost no smoke because the oxygen feed is so efficient that nearly every particle of wood vapor gets burned cleanly inside the pit. Your eyes will not sting, your clothes will not smell. Your neighbors may not even realize you have a fire going unless they walk directly into your yard. And after it is all done, after the ashes cool, you scoop them out, fill the holes with the dirt you set aside, drop the sod square back on top, and your yard looks exactly like it did before. No installation, no permanent structure, no inspector, no permit. The most low-impact, high-output heating method I have ever personally tested across 3 different states over 2 full winters. But the whole is only half the story. And this is the part I promised you at the very beginning. This is what was written on the back pages of that 1742 German manual. The one modification that takes this underground pit from a very efficient fire into a 10-hour self-sustaining, radiant heater that runs all night while you sleep. After your fire is burning steadily, you take 1 piece of green hardwood. Green meaning freshly cut, not dried. Ideally, green hickory or green oak, no thicker than your wrist. And you lay it across the very top of the pit opening, slightly off-center, so that it covers roughly half the hole. That is the entire modification. 1 piece of green wood laid across the top. Here is what it does. Because the wood is green, it contains moisture. It does not catch fire immediately. Instead, it slowly bakes from the heat rising below it. As it bakes, the underside begins to carbonize, to char slowly into a partial cap over the opening of the pit. That cap dramatically reduces the rate at which hot air escapes upward. The fire below cannot race into open flame because the oxygen flow is now metered by the gap between the green logs and the edge of the pit. Combustion slows to a controlled, nearly perfect smolder. The soil walls radiate heat inward. The stones at the bottom hold and return energy. And the green log itself, after 8 or 9 hours of slow baking, has fully dried out from the heat below and eventually becomes part of the fuel load in the final hours of the burn. The Amish family who showed me this technique called it the nightcap log. They told me their grandfather, their great-grandfather, and their great-great-grandfather had all used the same method on cold nights when one person needed to stay warm in the barnyard through a long animal watch or a difficult calving. The technique is described in that 1742 document in handwritten German as a method for keeping a fire alive through an entire winter night without tending. I tried it in my own backyard the following week. I lit the fire at 9 in the evening. I placed the green log across the opening at 10:30. I went inside and went to sleep. I came back out at 6 in the morning. There was still a glowing coal bed under the carbonized log. The soil around the pit was warm to the touch. A small pot of water I had left on the edge of the stones the night before was still steaming. 9 hours of usable heat from a single load of wood in the open air, with no tending, no electricity, no fan, no fuel additive. Just a hole, a tunnel, the right wood stacked in the right order, and a green log laid across the top at the right moment. That is the 200-year heat secret. That is what was sitting in a wooden box in an attic in Lancaster County while the rest of America spent billions of dollars on propane fire pits and steel fire rings that throw most of their heat straight up into the cold sky. Now go do it, this weekend. Dig the 2 holes, stack the wood the way I described, lay the green log across the top before you go to bed. Then come back and tell me in the comments what kind of soil you built it in. Was it Pennsylvania clay, Texas sand, Michigan loam? Type your soil type and how many hours the heat lasted. That is how we build a real record together, one backyard at a time, that the mainstream guides will never publish. If you got value from this video, share it with one person right now. Not 10 people, just one. Someone you know who is tired of burning through a cord of wood and still being cold. One share from you gets this knowledge to someone who actually needs it. That matters more than any algorithm. Hit the like button if this changed the way you think about something as simple as a backyard fire. Subscribe to Hidden Life Hacks right now because the next video I am working on covers how the Amish keep an upstairs bedroom at a steady 72 degrees in the middle of February without a single duct, vent, or thermostat anywhere in the house. And I promise you the method involves something that most American homeowners walk past every single day without ever realizing what it does. You're not going to want to miss that one. Stay close. Keep the fire burning low and slow.